let's jump into previews, Neil. Like we've talked here for 15 minutes to just let people join the show that want to join the show. Those folks that don't, too bad for them. They don't get to hear all of our hot takes about
Yeah.
these guys.
I mean, some of this stuff, like, actually, I'm excited to talk about a few of these cards. Some of these cards are just, like, I think kind of obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't, obvious is not bad. I think they're obvious good, but, there's, like, you have one up on screen, there's, like, not a lot of analysis, probably.
Right.
We're just going to talk about how good it is. And
so let's take a second here. Just really quick, if you're in chat right now and you haven't said anything or whatever, that's fine. We are running a vote right now on which of the new PBs you're most excited for after this first preview, and you can do that by typing !vote space and then typing out the Phoenixborn, either Lulu or Orrick. So which one are you most excited about? Be sure to vote in chat. I will close it out as we get to the end of our preview here, and we'll see what chat is most excited about. So. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about Summon Ash Spirit. Since that's up on screen right now, this is out of the Messenger of Peace. This is Orrick, and Inquisitor is most excited for Sheep and other decks. Yeah, that's fair, Inquisitor. We'll get around to talking a lot about Sheep's impact on decks as we go forward. But this is a ready spell. It has a main action cost and a charm class to play it, so it has a book tax. And then the cost of summoning an Ash Spirit is main action exhaust and a time class. And you get to place an Ash Spirit conjuration onto your battlefield, and all players draw one card. That's not insignificant. It does have a focus 1. And then it says, then all opponents that could not draw a card must discard one card of their choice from their hand. That's interesting, right? That's kind of interesting because this is like, it's kind of a double dip on what Three-Eyed Owl's doing at the late game. It's not as good, obviously, in the early game, but
I have a hard time comparing it to Owl. I mean, obviously, like, it says discard on it, which is something that Owl does, but, like, this card is more like, in my mind, it's more like Abundance or Good Dove.
Yep, and Inquisitor's coming in already hot. He's right on the same page with you, Neil. Inquisitor is talking about Orchid Dove as you were bringing it up. So let's look at the Ash Spirit because it's obviously tied to this book.
Right. This is the part that makes it so good. The book itself is whatever. But...
Yeah, the Ash Spirit itself is the sheep. It's like a burning sheep. Don't ask me how sheep burn, but I hope the wool has...
Yeah, what makes this sheep ashy? I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't either. But it says, after this unit is destroyed as a result of an attack from a unit an opponent controls, destroy that target unit. And then it also has another ability, so it's,
right. It needs to have more text than that for sure.
Right. Smolder 1 at the end of the round, deal 1 damage to a target Phoenixborn whose owner has no cards in their draw pile. So set it on fire and it will get ashy, is what Inquisitor says. Fair enough. And it's an 0-2. Now we know how good 2 life 1 dice summons are. Look at Gilder, right? Like we know.
Well, maybe this is like an unpopular opinion, but Gilder makes this card look like trash Spirit.
You think
Gilder
so?
is absurd. This card is good, but not.
You still think Gilder is ranked higher than the Ash Spirit?
Oh yeah.
Really? Okay, that's a hot take for sure. I think we should click.
Gilder does something regardless of, like, you have a guy in, like, if you have full battlefield, Gilder's so good. Like, I love Gilder.
I love Gilder.
It's in a better color. But this card is very, very good. And I don't think it's, like, very similar to Gilder, other than it is a 0-2. Like, I think this card is more like can't think of it. Swallow? Nightshade Swallow?
Yeah, so that's a card that I've been looking at a lot more too. We'll talk about Swallow later on when we're not in preview season, because there's some interesting interactions with Nightshade Swallow and Knights in this game right now. So
yeah, Warrior. I would agree with that specifically. Gilder is a better card, like, just as a card. Though obviously decks built around Ash Spirit are, like, need it to win.
Right.
well, maybe not needed to win, but it's like this is just like a better Orchid Dove for sure. So decks
this
that were
does have
playing
a
Orchid Dove, this is better.
this does have a conjuration count of 3 as well, and I think that's interesting as we get into further down the road in this preview. We'll talk about some other cards that go well with the Ash Spirit, but um, do you think this? I mean, honestly, this card looks like a control card to me. It doesn't necessarily say like have to play it in mill, right? Like we're
Correct.
yeah,
I agree. Like the card itself is good. Like both halves of this, the book and the sheep. Like if you just erase the second amount of text, the card would still be really good.
right.
Like, and it would just be, essentially like the best blocker. Um, it it's just really hard to attack through, right? Like it.
Yeah, I think that's the point that I was going to follow up with here was that Ash Spirit really puts a lot of pressure on attack decks, right? You have a hard time. At some point, an attack deck has to go to Phoenixborn, right? Like it can't win unless it has a pivot built into it, and then it's not really attacking anymore, right? It's milling it in its own way, or it's burning or whatever. The the attack decks, like Ash Spirit's got to make Grave Knight feel really bad, right? Just
Well, and it makes any unit bigger than it not want to attack face, except for Frostback Bear, I guess. Like, just
yeah, terrifying as it sits here like this right now. Terrifying is still the bane of all of these O attack units, right? So any terrifying unit has big power just in a vacuum card for card comparison, right? Like the way I've beat a lot of mill decks in my day is the mill decks tend to play one or two sort of units that can block terrifying, and so if you can properly handle the units that can block your terrifying, they have no way to protect themselves from two bears running them over round, and that just means that they do more damage faster than the mill deck gets to its victory condition. And
yeah, I mean, this when you think about what the board state actually looks like with Ash Spirits in play, discounting like cards we'll talk about later in this stream, like this isn't the end all be all of your opponent can never attack.
mm-hmm.
Like if you have a Hammer Knight or a Swordsman or whatever, like if the Ash Spirit is the only unit in play, I guess they can't attack. But if the Ash Spirit's the only unit in play, I feel like you're doing okay in most cases.
You're still going to have a hard time wanting to trade a bear into Spirit, right? I mean, I guess
that's just never going to happen.
Well,
without the interaction of other cards, like those cards just don't fight. Like the Ash Spirit is never going to attack the bear, and the bear's never going to get blocked by the Ash Spirit.
Sure. I just mean like if you're trying to maximize damage on the Phoenixborn face, then you really have to consider like if you have like other big units like knights in play, you have to consider using the bear as sort of a sacrificial lamb to get your big damage through.
That was what I was going to say. Like when you just like mock up in your mind.
Did you like my pun? Come on, nobody even caught my pun. Sacrificial lamb. Come on, the sheep are strong with me today.
Okay. When you think about what it actually looks like that's the scenario where I guess Ash Spirit is the best on its own, like when it's the only unit, because then it really does protect Phoenixborn. But if your opponent then just gets to choose how they deal with it, right? So in a regular board state, like let's imagine just the only cards we know about are Ash Spirit. So you have an Ash Spirit and a Gilder, or an Ash Spirit and well, I guess we shouldn't use Gilder because that's gonna be the next point. So Ash Spirit and an Orchid Dove or whatever, or Ash Spirit and a Hollow or something. Like as soon as you have a second unit, the Ash Spirit becomes a lot less effective because you can just attack other unit.
Mm-hmm.
And the Phoenixborn blocks, Phoenixborn guard maybe, and then you get your Phoenixborn damage past the sheep, no problem. Or it doesn't block, and the unit we're talking about, presumably is good in combat against whatever it's attacking. Now, if you get a unit guard in play, I think that changes some stuff because essentially, like what most of these are going to look like, I think, is you're going to send you know, your salamander, monk, and a nature ping at the ash spirit, something like that. Um, but if you have the unit guard, then you can kind of like play with the battlefield a little more, make sure the ash spirit gets to block. Because it doesn't have unit guard, it would be obviously it could never have unit guard. The card would be bonkers.
But you could give it devotion. You know.
Well, that's bad.
Yeah.
But uh, the in general, I think it's not like the end all be all. Like it's going to be very good always, assuming your opponent wants to attack you, which I think is a lot of the time. But the way that I imagine it is gonna be like you have a knight and a bear, and I have an ash spirit and a bear or something, and that battlefield is not profitable for me, right? Like the ash spirit, like you can't just say the ash spirit deals with the knight. It doesn't in that case. Like you just like send your knight at my bear, and then the ash spirit does nothing.
Right, or you just send your bear into Phoenixborn and see if they want to exhaust their bear to protect the two.
Right. In either any of your attacks that you would make from that board state, besides Knight attacks Ash Spirit, are not good for me.
Right.
Like, and you're never gonna be like Swordsman attack Ash Spirit, right? Like,
right.
You have to be a weird game state for that to happen. So, I do think this card is very, very good, and I think with a little bit of work, the player with the Ash Spirit can really, engineer a situation where its blocks are always good. But just in general, I don't think this is a card that you just like slam in every deck.
No, I don't think so either. But I do think it has a place in outside of mill as well, because it's got
agreed.
It's got built in mill pivot. So a lot of times.
The additional text on this, like the smolder and the focus on the book, is just nonsense.
Right.
Like it's not super good, but it's just unnecessary. This card is already good. Like
yep.
Without that. But obviously they want Orrick to look like a mill deck. I guess that would be my assumption after they printed this card.
It seems like anytime we get a charm precon, the charm precon is always mill focus. Like we'll go back and look at Saria from the core, right? She was all about this like abundance and purge and she had all these mill cards, and then Leo brings in the orchid doves and the all the Leo mill type stuff that you see. So like we've seen this kind of over and over again as a recurring theme when we get charm decks from
obviously like charm is the mill color,
right? So we just continue to see tools added to mill in that space. But Ash Spirit looks very good from a control card perspective as well. And
I mean, this is the kind of card that if you're assuming that like you're playing time, because obviously you have to play time.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're playing some kind of control deck with time cards in it, like this card's very, very good. Obviously we've played lots of Gilder decks that just have the one charm dice just for the book tax and then never, anything else. And I think that this card is good enough to support that kind of play, like where you just have a charm dice because, and you only ever spend it as a charm dice on round one to play your Ash Spirit book because you may only have one. Though I do think this card is good in multiples also, even if it didn't have the focus because it's so cheap and efficient.
And Inquisitor adding something that is probably a little less obvious, and I think this is a good point, Inquisitor, so thanks for bringing it up. He's saying, also worth noting that it's a breed of owl defense. So because of the all players draw card, it gives you back a potential first 5. And or gives you your 6th card against that.
I mean, so I agree and I disagree. I agree that in round 1, your junk card you drop Ash Spirit is fodder for the owl so that your you don't get one of your 5 demonic tutors discarded. But after that, it has no effect because Owl is essentially like a 1 for 0. When you activate it, you get 1 card from your opponent for none of yours.
Mm-hmm.
And Ash Spirit is a 1 for 1. So if you combine Ash Spirit and Owl, you're still getting 2 for 1 by your opponent because you're giving them a resource. Like if that makes sense, like
Mm-hmm. It does.
So I agree that the 1 card drawn from it in round 1 is important against Owl because obviously your first 5 should be much higher value than a random card drawn from your deck. But the remainder of the game, Owl is still getting you for maximum value, regardless of whether you
it's
activate Ashford or not.
what's interesting to me about Owl. What's interesting about Owl, just in general, and I don't want to go on too deep of a tangent, but just to add to it, is like there are not a lot of great answers in round 1 to Owl, and I think that's what makes it so good. The best answers are obviously Water Blast and Enter the Fray, but if you're not playing Aerodel or Odette, it's a lot more difficult to deal with Owl efficiently, right? Like it's
Well, yeah, I mean, an Owl isn't literally a 1 for 0.
right.
Like, it is very good because usually the card that you discard to it in first 5 is worth more than a single charm dice from your opponent.
Right.
But you have to remember that, like, they spent a card in their first 5 to play book, and they spent a dice from their first round to play it. And so, I mean, like 99% of the time, very worth in round 1.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not 100% free.
Warrior, I would say if you're really thinking about answers in Time Charm and whether they needed one, I mean, specifically Time Charm, sure, but if you just consider both of those colors in a vacuum against Owl, Time had Swift Messenger, right? So, like, that's cheaper than.
Well, so in that case, you're just saying, like, Owl turns my best, like, instead of Owl making me discard at first 5, it turns one of the cards in my hand into a 1/1.
Right.
Like, and usually my first 5 cards are better than a 1/1.
Well, I think you still have to have a plan for Swifty if you're going to do that. Is all I was going. Whereas leading with that, right? Like you still have to have a Swifty plan after that. But
yeah, Owl is a strange card. It's kind of the only thing in Ashes that does what it does.
Mm-hmm.
There's an argument to be made for Psychic Vampire being similar, but Psychic Vampire is much easier to like beat.
Yep.
You like dump your hand out or whatever, or like just not do anything to it and it doesn't die. The Owl, like you said, with the exception of a few abilities in the game, just trades up every time.
Yeah, because
you can't leave it alone. You can leave the vampire alone, but the Owl, if you leave it alone, it'll just get you.
An Ash Spirit's going to be very similar in terms of, like, if you're trying to deal with the Ash Spirit, it's going to trade up a lot, right? Outside of a hand.
I'm not convinced that that's true. I want to see it in play sometimes because obviously it has the potential to trade way up, but it also has the potential to some of the board states I was trying to discuss earlier, like just sit. And if you can attack it with a like a 1 power guy and just like it'll die, right? Like,
well, and honestly, like Psychic Vampire looks pretty good against it, right? Because do they really want to like kill your Psychic Vampire?
Is it a May? No, it's not even a May.
Right. So
that's a good way to kill it, I guess.
Like Psychic Vampire looks pretty good because it can force that early Phoenixborn block, which gives you a lot of board control through the remainder of your round. So I mean,
and I think a lot of times what's going to happen is it's going to get a damage on it from something because there's a lot of extraneous sources of 1 damage, Nature's Wrath, whatever, that like you're already doing and will put a damage on it, or like activate Gilder Book, and then all of a sudden like other sources of 1 damage, while it will probably trade you down to the Ash Spirit. It'll only trade you down by half a card or half a dice or something. And and it'll give you a huge amount of tempo because you'll be sitting on this board where like, this Ash Spirit is holding off a couple of my guys, and then all of a sudden I'm like Gilder Nature Ping and then attack.
Right.
And if it's near the end of the round, like, yeah, you got me for half a dice because I had to spend 2 dice and I get to keep a 0-2, but it opened up my attacks.
Right.
Like, I think that's probably the kind of thing you're going to see a lot.
I think
with Ashford in play.
The other one that I look at a lot is like I've been looking at a little bit closer that can kind of deal with this guy if you're really, really concerned with him and your deck's only source of win is through attack swings. Is Summon Masked Wolf looks pretty good, and also Light Swordsman. Both of those guys can come in, attack it right away.
Yeah, I mean, any of those 2 ones are probably good against it. Like,
well, I don't think like the Shadow Spirit or the Ancestor Spirit are necessarily good enough because there's so many ways for your opponent to interact with them before.
Well, it's less, not impossible, obviously, because natural is so good, but it's less likely that your Charm time deck is going to have random nature pings.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that cards like Ancestor Spirit or Shadow Spirit or whatever are safer. And obviously those you're very willing to trash into an Ash Spirit.
Right. All right, so let's move on. I think we've beat the Ash Spirit pretty well down for just a basic O2 Conjuration that does a lot of cool things here. Now we're going to talk about a card that really kind of makes Ash Spirit bonkers, right? We're starting to get into combo land with it a little bit, and we're going to talk about
this card is just like obnoxious, right? Like,
right. So,
and it's not just Ash Spirit; it's like Owl or
we'll talk about all of it.
Whatever.
I want to run down the card for our viewers and for anybody that is not familiar with the Flock Shepherd yet. This is a ally. New charm ally, so this doesn't require time at all. This can go in any charm deck without splashing time. And it's a main action, 1 charm class and a basic to summon, which is a very efficient cost. You get a 1/3 with recover 1, and he's got 2 abilities on him. First ability is gather 2. After an opponent declares attackers, you may add 2 to the attack value of all units you control with a printed attack value of 0 for the remainder of turn. And then, as if that wasn't enough, and then protect. Units you control with a printed attack value of 0 cannot be targeted by spells, abilities, or dice powers an opponent controls. So you play a Flock Shepherd, the Gilder we just got done talking about, the Ash Spirit, the Glowfinch from Leo, all of these things that normally you would spend some amount of dice and resources trying to control, you can't. You now have to spend all your dice and resources trying to take care of.
So, yeah, there's a little bit to unpack there.
Sure.
Just starting from the top, I think 1/3/1 for 2 is very good.
Very good.
I think that.
Well, what's really interesting about Flock Shepherd here, and maybe this is part of Nick's new design philosophy, because we've seen this in the past. Like Pain Shaman is a 1/3/1, but it's a 2-class die, right? Like Pain Shaman, I think what hurts Pain Shaman and makes him not as playable as he would be normally is the fact that it takes 2 nature class die to play him. Versus if it was like a nature class and a basic like Flock Shepherd, don't you think we'd see a lot of Pain Shamans running around?
I don't.
Okay.
I think, and the reason is because Pain Shaman's effect specifically is so redundant in the game, because the heal for 1 is not, but like that's much less impactful than the ping, and there's just 800 more efficient ways to do 1 damage.
Sure.
So yeah, the 1/3/1 body is good, but would I rather just have 2 nature dice in my pool to activate natural side action? Yes, I think so.
Warrior says, so can you play Sheep without Shepherd?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think you have to have Shepherd.
I assume you mean Ash Spirit when you say Sheep.
Yeah.
Like, is that what we're calling it? Okay.
I'll
remember that.
They're getting dubbed as Sheep, the Ash Spirits.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think that you can play. Like I was saying, I think if you're playing control deck, or even some kind of mill deck, you can play 1 charm dice for the book tax, and that can be the only charm card in your deck.
Yeah.
It really is very good.
I think a lot of it. I think a lot of what's going to happen with Flock Shepherd is the reason Gilder gets that kind of play in decks is because Nature has so many supporting casts that are so great. So you can charm one charm die in your Nature deck just to play Gilder, and then you can sort of play the rest of your game with 9 dice and a basic, right? And
right.
when you look at Ash Spirit, the dice that is the die you have to play is time, and we don't have a deep card pool for time yet, but we're getting there, right? We're starting to get there.
I assume we'll have enough time cards after the next, like, we're gonna get a whole another 10 at least.
Well, it's not a real 10, right? Because like what we're seeing with Flock Shepherd here, this is a charm card. So because
we're getting 2 decks with 10 cards in them.
Sure.
So we're getting 20 cards. I was guessing half.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're like the Ash Spirit is definitely a time card. It's a time charm card, so it's kind of a hybrid. But yeah, I'm telling you, this guy just
the Flock Shepherd, like, it's hard to. I think it would be hard to play, like when you're laying out your cards for your deck. I think that you could just play Ash Spirit and be fine. But when you're playing this deck and you look at the opportunity cost of having a Flock Shepherd in your pile, even if you only have 1 charm dice, the card is very good. And it's just an easy include, right? Right. Especially in the colors we're talking about, Time Charm, where up to this point they've been supporting cast, so it's not super deep. You're probably not doing much better than Flock Shepherd in a lot of cases.
You know what's interesting with Flock Shepherd that I was just considering, that might be good enough and not require a ton of time and force your opponent to be able, to build up or plan a reaction to it, is you could play a Flock Shepherd with Squall Stallion and then just Explosive Glow with the Stallion when you're ready to do something with it. So you don't ever have to actually torrent with the Stallion, because the Shepherd's going to protect the Stallions. Is X considered 0 in this game? I think it is.
I don't know.
I think it is. I've got the rulebook here.
I don't know. This card is very good.
Yes.
It's obviously very narrow. It operates in a very specific archetype. But it's good with all the cards you named. It's good with Gilder and Dove and Owl and whatever Leo's bird is, and just those cards.
Inquisitor, do you just play it with Xander? You could just play it with Xander, right? Because Xander would be a perfect pair there. You just go Xander Mill. So
all of that's fine, but what do you do when they just play Meteor?
Well, Meteor. Okay, so that was you have bridged the gap here that I was going to eventually bridge into here, and that bridge was that the existence of Ash Spirit, the existence of Flock Shepherd, and more specifically probably Flock Shepherd over Ash Spirit in particular, we're going to see a lot of exhaustion control effects become prominent here, right? Neil, Meteor, Earthquake, to Inquisitor's point as well. I think, Rosefire Dancer, if you're an illusion, will continue to get stronger. Certainly, Rosefire is probably a pretty much underplayed ally at this point, but specifically it's that way because, because of the illusion cost.
It's in a bad color and it dies everything.
Right. I think Steady Gaze is also a reasonably good card that's not seen a lot of play, but that double cost, that double class cost on it again is a big deal. I'm not finding the answer right now, but I will look up that answer. I'm pretty sure X is equal to 0 in this game.
Even if it is, I don't think that. You can do that if that's what you want to be doing. I guess. Because I don't think that Horse is better than any of these other cards we named in this deck.
The thing that's interesting about the horse, though, is because it can't be targeted by reactions, it really narrows the play patterns when you do make that explosive growth attack play. And
Yeah,
it's
but
a 4-3.
who cares if you attack for 4?
Yeah, but I mean, it depends if you can get in, right? Like if you can set yourself up to get in.
But like you just attack for 4. Who cares? That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Because you have to keep it 0 power until this time that you attack.
Here it is. Cards that use X as a value will also feature a definition of X for that card. X equals 0 for the purpose of determining magic play cost. Example, out of mist deals X damage, so they don't define.
The way that that's worded makes it sound like it doesn't work.
It may not. I thought this was saying X equals 0, but X equals 0 for the purpose of determining magic play costs. So does that mean it's only inclusive of magic play costs? This sounds like we're going to have to page SCAC at some point.
It doesn't matter that much because I don't think that that's like what you want to be doing. I think that like making a 4/3 at the cost of an additional card in your hand that like is just like that's like too dorky.
Inquisitor.
Like, that card is not the 4/3 with explosive growth on it is not a better card than just having an Ash Spirit or an Orchid Dove in play with a Flock Shepherd.
Sure, I'm not arguing that. I'm just looking for places outside here that maybe aren't considered, just with that protectability in particular. But Warrior says, if somebody meteors his board, because most of his stuff is single dice cost, it's easy to bounce back. I agree with that. I think Neil is the bigger culprit here. I think that we're going to see a rise in Neils, just simply off of the back of it's a way for a player to, shut down a board full of stuff like this and try to win a game, right? And that that can be a real issue. And let's be fair, like you're still limited. I agree that you have all these things in terms of cheapness goes, but you're still limited in some ways. And I think that Flock Shepherd gets in a lot of trouble against Winged Lioness. I know Winged Lioness can't kill it outright to point, but again, Divine Power on Winged Lioness, like there's a lot of ways that you can get to 3 attack out of a Lioness, but anything with stock,
This card is really good.
Oh, it's super good. And it's got a finite number of answers.
Very good with sheep. That's why it's got the sheep like printed on it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me the way that it works. Like all these things say with printed attack value 0,
mm-hmm.
So I assume that like these stack to where if you have 2 of them, like they both give their +2. Like I assume that when they get their +2 that they don't get the protect turned off, like that kind of stuff. Just because, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I read this the first time, I missed that. I thought that when you like gathered, it turned the protect off because then their power wasn't 0 anymore.
Well, here's something else that's kind of interesting. I don't know how long.
But obviously, that's not the case.
I'm just waiting on this X equals 0 thing, but you could set up.
You got something weird with my camera.
Oh, what happened? Oh,
you pulled up Discord.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's. Not that I think anyone wants to see my face anyway, but
there we go.
When you switched off of switch Discord channels in it.
Yep, because it's capturing Discord. So so I think one of the things that's interesting is this could be used as also like a mid-game snake. Like if you lose a snake mid-game, you could have this as sort of a tech card in a snake deck to give you the protection you need on your snake for a little while longer to reestablish your board position. Because sometimes that's what happens with snake in a mid-game too. So we'll just find out about that X equals 0 thing. I don't know. Again, this card has... I think this card has unforeseen circumstances that are beyond just like the owls, doves, and
I agree that the text like affects more units than that, but none of the things that like the ones that we've named are all the most efficient, and that's what's going to be the most competitive.
Sure.
Like because efficiency beats out like weirdness. Because when you have this in play, like this does a much better job of making your opponent's attacks like really awkward than Ash Spirit does. Like if you just have this and like an owl and an orchid dove or whatever, even not having the Ash Spirit, like you're already doing great because the 2 damage you get out of either of those blockers that you already want to throw away, like that's getting a lot of stuff out of the dice you spent on them.
For sure.
But yeah, in general, I think this card's really good. I mean, what I don't like about this card has nothing to do with its playability. Um, is that it like shoehorns you in an archetype.
Right.
And this is something that like Magic was guilty of in the mid 2000s. Was like they'd like print these cards and they're like, all right, here's this card that's really good, and it makes you play all these other cards that we printed in the same set, like,
right.
And then deck building became less interesting.
Sure. I mean,
so
I certainly think that
I don't know that that's going to happen in Ashes because of the way that sets are printed in Ashes, but in general, like if you like reach for a Flock Shepherd, I'm gonna build a Flock Shepherd deck, then like your next 15 cards are already picked for you.
Kind of, yeah. Kind of in a similar way to how Standard Bearer does a very similar thing, right? Like when you pick Standard Bearer, you kind of end up shoehorned into like the next 5 or 6 cards you're going to go with Standard Bearer. You know, not maybe as many as Flock Shepherd, but Standard Bearer certainly feels like you're building a certain kind of deck around Standard Bearer.
I mean, I like Standard Bearer. That Standard Bearer was a point I was going to bring up. We were talking about the like just stats on this card because obviously Standard Bearer is similar in that it is a 1/3/1 basic class.
Standard Bearer's ability on card is a lot less impactful than this though.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Interesting. I think I would, but
I like Standard Bearer a lot. The reason that I haven't been playing much Standard Bearer is because of the depth of the time pool, not because of her power.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that she's as good as Flock Shepherd, but like if you looked at those, like imagine you knew nothing about Ashes and you knew no other cards in Ashes and you looked at Flock Shepherd and you looked at Standard Bearer, which do you think would lead you to more game wins?
No, wait, that's hard just because I know too much about Ashes, I think. But
right, the answer is Standard Bearer.
Yeah, it's probably Standard
because
Bearer.
It's like
it looks
this
aggressive
only works
and
on
proactive.
defense.
Yeah,
like it grows by itself. It doesn't require anything else going on.
Right.
So I think because of the nature of Ashes as we currently play it, Flock Shepherd is a better card than Standard Bearer, but I think Standard Bearer is very good. And to the earlier point where you were talking about Pain Shaman, like Standard Bearer and Flock Shepherd both, just like the stats on the card, you can just tell that they cost and stat units differently now than they did in the base set, right. Even in the reprints.
In the first 21 Phoenixborns, to be honest, like the first 20,
right? So yeah. I mean, definitely you can tell the difference between like the cards that didn't get reprinted and the cards that are new,
right? But
in general, like I don't think there's another sticky unit for basic class besides Frostback Bear,
right? And that really falls into the Conjuration, and we know how much it gets played because of its impact on the board and its efficiency.
And I think it's good. Like I think you want less. Maybe not. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I'm gonna hold my tongue on this one because I really like the card Standard Bearer.
Yeah.
But it's just like when I built a 4-book Arabelle deck going into season 2, I wanted the 2 life units so bad, and then like a lot of times I'd rather have a 1/3 than a 2/2. I think.
Yeah. Because there's not that much difference between them, right?
It's because it's so easy to do 1 damage out of combat that like if 2/2 is the thing you're fighting, or 2 like things that have 1 toughness or 2 toughness. If you have a 1/3. Like, obviously, the 1/3 is really good against the things that have 1 toughness. But even just because of Nature Ping and other effects like that, like the 1/3 versus anything with 2 toughness is still good.
Yeah. So I think Inquisitor adds to this list with Beast Tamer and String Mage from the base set. I think String Mage is an interesting card where it's it feels like a lot of work for it to do anything, and maybe
What does
that's
that card do? Is
it's
that
got a
the
it's got a side action
like
without exhaust, and you can move a wound token onto it, or you can
yeah,
move a
and
wound
it's a
token from it.
1/3.
Yeah. So,
And Beast Tamer is a good card. Beast Tamer, similarly to
but Beast Tamer costs
um,
Beast Tamer costs 2 charm class though, so I
right.
think it's in a different.
That was
It's a
literally what I was
different.
gonna say. Is similar to the standard bearer. The only reason it wasn't seeing a lot of play was that it forced you into a color that was mostly support.
Right.
Um, and it just didn't have the coverage. So maybe it will now.
I think Beast Tamer is certainly going to see a lot more play if we see things like Flock Shepherd be good, and you're going to be starting to play more charm. Then and when we get to the next card on this list, I think there's a lot of reason for Beast Tamer to start to rise up in deck list.
Beast Tamer doesn't actually have any synergy with these cards other than it's the same color, right?
Same color, and it's an alert tame one, so it's a good defensive unit. It doesn't specifically synergize, but it just has a nice. It slots in nicely in the color.
Yeah, I hope that we can do better than Beast Tamer in this deck specifically because it wants those 0 power creatures so bad. Like this deck just wants like it wants like a 0/5.
Yeah.
0/5 no text for 2.
Yeah.
Like that's what this deck wants.
For sure.
0/5 makes your attackers that attack it bigger even. Like give it some drawback, who cares? Like
so let's
reverse Beast Tamer. Beast Angerer.
Let's move on because we got a lot of cards to cover, and we've only covered 2 cards in 45 minutes, so we're right on par for our talkative selves. So Shepherd, we're all giving a big thumbs up right now. Cool card. It's going to do lots of neat things in the game. Don't know if it is up my alley in this kind of a deck, so I don't know how much I will play Shepherd, but we'll see. Rile the Meek. All right, so Rile the Meek is an action spell, has a main action cost and a charm class. So again, another just dedicated charm card here in this preview. It says, resolve the following effect once for each unexhausted unit you control with a printed attack value of 0. You may deal 1 damage to a target unit an opponent controls. Wow. Like, if you can, if
and this card's fine.
Fine. I think this card is got a ton of obviously the floor is 1, right? Like that's the floor. You're not going to play this card unless you can at least do 1.
I mean, this card is fine. It's very playable.
I would guess the expected value on this card's at 3, wouldn't you think? I mean, between Owl and
why?
Because I think you're going to easily have you can with
you
Leo,
think you're going to have 4 units in play? You
don't need 4.
Well, I guess I'm assuming that your game plan involves having a Shepherd in play, and that does not trigger this.
Why would?
So are you not playing Shepherd?
No, I'm saying Okay, so think Leo for just a second here. In turn 1 of Leo, you can make Owl Glowfinch turn 1 if you wanted to.
Sure.
Right. You turn around and turn 2 of your play, you make an Ash Spirit. I mean, obviously you can't literally do that because you have to put the book down, but you see where I'm getting with this. And then the next turn, so 4th or 5th turn of your first round, you could Rile the Meek for probably 3. I mean,
sure. I think 3 is a reasonable number.
I think it's an expected value of 2 to 3. That was what I was saying. Now the ceiling on it is, it could be
4.
No, it could be bigger than that. Leo's got a 6 battlefield, so even if you have 1 battlefield slot,
it could be bigger than that, right? So now we're getting to the point where yeah, so if I have Koji in play, I could do 10, right? Neat. Once you get to 4 units in play, you're probably already winning.
So that's an interesting.
I think this card again is good, but the way that I would view this card is that I try to get a 2-for-1 out of it, assuming.
Oh, Neil, we lost Neil there. Hello, Neil. Lose ya. Neil. Yep. This is what we were testing with Discord, was whether or not Discord was stable enough. I think in the future we'll move over to Zoom, because Zoom's a pretty stable video chat program. Being able to do webcam stuff like this.
Hello?
Hey, I got you back.
I don't know what happened. My computer just restarted for some reason. That was strange. So sorry about that. Hopefully I will stay connected. Let me see. Do you have video?
I don't have your video.
Yeah. Neat. Extremely high-tech, expensive computer, and it's conking out on me here.
Got him back. All right, we got you back now.
Okay, so what I was saying is I don't think that I would want to play this card assuming I'm going to get 3 damage out of it. I do think it's very playable. I think that in Charm, it's a unique kind of effect because they don't have a lot of actual removal spells. Obviously, Gilder is a damage source, but it's not Charm only, so it doesn't really count. But it seems more likely that your board state is going to look something like Shepherd plus 2/0 power guys, and you're going to shoot it off for 2 to kill a 1 toughness thing and finish off a larger unit. That seems like the most likely play. Because it has this thing where when it does a lot of damage, you already are 4 cards ahead of your opponent.
So let me ask you a question. How much experience have you had playing against Leo Mill?
Against Leo Mill specifically? Not very many, just watching it.
How many games have you watched of it?
I don't know, 3 or 4.
Okay. In my experience against Leo Mill, because the only unit that you really want to interact with on Leo's board, generally in current existing Leo Mill decks, is the Owl, because you don't really want to remove the Orchid Dove, so you actually get a better position by letting Leo fill his battlefield up, and then winning through your own burn or through terrifying or a combination of both. And that really does set up Rile the Meek to be worth 4 or 5 damage pretty easily, maybe even 6.
But do you think that we're talking about a state where terrifying doesn't matter because of Shepherd, right? I assume if you're playing Rile the Meek, you're playing Shepherd.
Sure. I mean I think Shepherd changes that, but I'm just talking about an existing just plugging Rile the Meek into existing archetype without the Shepherd. I'm not saying you got to.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. Sure, is what I'm saying.
That may be true.
In a reasonable way, if we're talking about this specific deck that already has 1 million 0-power creatures in it, you kind of have to play Shepherd, right?
Sure.
It is an upgrade for whatever you're doing. But what my point was just that if you're in that game state where you have Leo full battlefield and a Shepherd in play, is Rile the Meek necessary? It'll be good. It'll obviously be great to do 4 damage or whatever. But
I think it's still good for killing off knights on the opposite side of your opponent's board for 1 die. Right? If that.
Yeah, but you're already doing that, right?
No, how are you doing that?
Ash Spirit?
Only if they attack into the Ash Spirit. The Ash Spirit doesn't have unit guard.
Yeah, but if they I feel like this card is going to be a 2 damage spell, or you're already winning, is what my take is.
I mean, I guess I've played against the Mill matchup a lot. A lot. I mean, it seems like everybody plays Leo Mill on Ash Techie. I don't know why that is, but everybody I seem to ever get paired up with is in Leo Mill. And I agree that Shepherd probably guarantees Leo a lot more wins, because the best way to beat Leo is through a combination of terrifying attacks and burn. You watched me do that in the Ash Techie tournament against Carl, remember?
Right.
But those board states are not unusual for me to have 3 or 4 units on my battlefield that really can't do anything, because I can't efficiently kill. I don't want to kill his things off because it advances his win con. So
right. So if that is the game state, is Rile the Meek necessary? If you already can't attack or do anything, does me killing your Frostback Bear
Yeah.
matter that much?
No, 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 not to kill the Frostback Bear, to kill the Knight, because if you are on Shepherd, Knight in like Frostback Bear and Knight into Shepherd is a way to win the game, because you force one on a PB block, and then you force the second attack into Shepherd to kill it, and now you've got open attacks, right? So like protecting the Shepherd is so important that Ryle the Meek sitting there with 5 other units on the field allows you to kill everything but a Root Armored Knight.
Yeah, I mean, I think this card's good. I think it will be an include in those type of decks. I just it it seems like all it needs to do is 2 damage to be good. So it's definitely playable and definitely good, because that will be an easy amount. But like,
I would argue 3
I'm just
is
not
really
like
the
super
real
excited
number.
about this card, because I don't care if it does 10. Like
Sure, it
if
doesn't
it
need to
does
do
2,
10.
that's good enough.
No, it doesn't need
And
to do 10.
if it,
Yeah.
uh, I I think I'm gonna win more games. Like I guess I don't know. It seems fine. I'm sure that I'm gonna see it drawn a bunch of times with 1 or no dudes in play, and then I will feel good about my analysis.
Okay. I think that, to your point, the expected value on this card is probably 3. And
Well, I mean, I was gonna say 2, but
I
it
think
might be somewhere in
it's
between.
more than that, because of how sticky O2 units are.
I think in Leo it's probably 3, because he has the ability to make side action 0 power unit. I don't know if there's another side action 0 power unit. Um,
No.
but being able to make Glowfinch and do this in the same turn makes it probably 3. Because obviously they can't, unless they have an ice trap, I guess, they can't stop you from
Right.
making it through in that case.
Ice trap would get you for sure. But ice trapping Finch is not a very good feel good. That's like double discard.
Well, what if you have a Prospect Bear and they have a Charm Dice up and you think they're going to Growl the Mikio? Would you do it then?
I don't know.
I would.
Maybe. It depends. I mean, it depends. Like, there's so many decisions there, because you have to really play against their win con. I mean, that's what you have to do when you play against Mill, is fight against their win con. And every card that you meditate and every card that you discard is 1 more life away from you. Right? Like, that's how you have to consider it. And while that is all resource intensive, it's not unusual for the last round of a Mill deck, because of the Orchid Dove and its ability once the deck is empty, to just get you for 9 to 12 damage with fatigue. And like, you just go, okay, well, I looked like I was a million miles ahead going into the final round and just can't get through.
Well,
And
I mean, like, all of the things you just named are on-board tricks, so you should know how close you are to dead. But
it's not as easy as you think it is, because there are other onboard tricks that matter there as well.
if they're on board, by definition, you should be able to read them,
But
right? Like,
well, yeah. But what I'm saying is that like Anguish and Leo, things that come out of hand that aren't on board are what change the number up and make it difficult to actually accurately calculate.
yeah, I mean, I get that people like to play Mill. Like, I know that's there's Mill players. I'll play it if it's the best deck, I guess. Uh, I like Round the Meek. These 3 cards are obviously powerful and
Sure.
obviously like very good together. Again, that was like my one detractor from liking the design of these cards, was that like oh, here's a whole deck. Like,
Dustin coming in hot with that sub. Thanks, Dustin.
Instead of having to put any work into your own deck building, there, just here silver platter and such.
Fair enough.